Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and today I'm excited to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is this whole idea of how do you have balance? How do you have harmony between work and life? And this is extremely important to me because I have worked throughout my entire career. I took time off, just a few short months after I had my babies. My babies are now full grown in their 20s, out in the world, making their way. And I often get asked, well, how do you do it all? How do you do all these things between having a great work, having raised two very well adjusted, contributing members to society, adults, and my kids? And how do you do it all? And my quick answer to that is I don't. I don't do it all. And I think that's one of the ways I feel like I have been successful in this because I learned a long time ago that trying to do it all, trying to be a high achieving person at work and to be this like super turbo parent is it just was not going to be possible. And one of the things that I realized was, I was not going to feel guilty about this. And it was an advice that I got early on in my career. It was even before I got married. And I went to this workshop, and this one woman was saying, don't work the third shift. The first shift is when you go to work. The second shift is when you come home and deal with all the things in your personal life. And the third shift is when you feel guilty. You're feeling guilty about not having done enough in the first and second shifts. And the advice I got was never work the third shift. And so, in many ways, what I realized was that balance is a work. We talk about work-life balance, and the word balance sounds great, right? I feel like everything is in the right place. I've been able to figure out how to like make this all work. And what I realized that balance for me, at least, that balance was something that was going to be unattainable. That there was this perfect place to be where everything at work is going to be working great and everything at home is going to be working great. And what I realized instead was that it was extremely messy, extremely uncomfortable most of the time, and just pulling my hair out all the time. And what I realized was that there's no such thing as balance. And then instead, that the reality is there is just a series of compromises and trade-offs I was having to constantly make. And that these were less than optimal compromises that I was making. I was compromising too much on work, sometimes a lot more on the family side. And the thing I had to realize is that I had to be in harmony with all of this. It wasn't trying to make it all balance and work out. But the one thing that I could control was how I felt about this. And that way it was about achieving harmony. And so this reminds me of the serenity prayer, which is grant us the serenity of mind to accept that which cannot be changed, courage to change that which can be changed, and the wisdom to know one from the other. And that to me was what kept me sane, to be able to have the serenity, to have this harmony in looking at my work and looking at my life and being able to make sense of all of that in the same place. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this, and in particular, what I'd love for you to share today is, of course, I'd love to hear that you're on the stream and listening to it. Share where you're coming from, but also share how do you maintain this harmony between work and life? What are the best practices you have? And in particular, how do you as a leader encourage this harmony amongst your team? The reason I wanted to talk about this today is that it is clearly a very big issue for people, especially coming out of COVID, where there was such a big focus on taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families. How do we balance this work and life? How do we live in harmony with all of this? And it has definitely impacted the way we work, the future of work, and also how we as leaders need to change. So we'd love to hear you talk about and share what are the things that you have found to be really helpful about thinking how to do this for yourself, but also for your colleagues, for your teams, for your company. So just a couple of thoughts to just kick off this conversation. So first of all, one of the things that I found really interesting in my research and just preparing for this today is how do we actually achieve this harmony in work and life? And a couple of things that I have found to be very helpful. First of all, as I mentioned, accept that there is no perfect balance and that instead aim for harmony. And in particular, defining where you are willing to make the trade offs. As I said before, it's a series of less than optimal compromises. So, what are the compromises you are willing to make uh, and to let go of being a perfectionist? I'll give you one very poignant example. One day when my son was still very young, he was in elementary school, and I was saying goodnight to him. And as I was tucking him into bed, I said, I just want to say good night tonight, but I won't be here in the morning because I'm taking a flight out tonight. So you're going to get up and get ready for school, but just to set expectations, I won't be here in the morning. And he got a little sad and he said to me, Mommy, do you love your clients more than you love me? Because that's what it felt like. That how could I leave him to go and work when he was presumably like the most important thing in my life. And I sat and thought about it and I said, how do I respond to that? And what I said to him is, you know that you and your sister are you are the most precious things to me. And also know that I can't be the person I am. I can't be the mom to you that I am unless I have my work too as well. So it's hard to understand is what I told him, how I could be possibly away from you. But know that so you go to school, you can't be all the time with me. That's your work. I have my work to make the world better and to help our family be better too. But this is really important to me. It's meaningful to me and it's important. And so it was really hard for him to understand, but he kind of nodded and goes, okay, I think I get it. But I said to him, more than anything else, if there was something you needed from me, I drop everything to pay attention to you. And you also know sometimes that some things happen at work and I really have to pay attention to work. And sometimes I can't be here all with you, but you're okay. And so we make these trade offs. And he began to understand why those trade offs had to be made, why I wasn't going to be there in the morning, but I was always going to be there for him. So accepting that there's no perfect balance and that harmony has to be done is just really important. I see that some comments here. Jay says has this great point. Surprised that the expression hasn't been copyrighted by some work gurus already. I think you're assuming the whole the balance and the harmony thing. So I think that's a great point, Jay. This is one of those things where the cynic, I think, it says like, why do we still keep talking about this when it's been so much in the lexicon for so long? And it's not just for women; it's for anybody in any part of their life. How do we balance and have harmony between these two really important areas of our lives? I love this one here. And this one person retired with 33 years, managed to maintain this work-life balance. He was happy leaving, never brought work issues and stress home, and retired in harmony with two lovely daughters and a lovely wife. And just really, I thought really being able to leave, I think what you're saying, all the stress and work at home and be able to transition and really enjoy being at home in separate home and work in such a beautiful way. Let's see. And I think again, Manoj is just chopping and just jumping and saying you love this topic. So great. Thank you for that reinforcement. And Jay has another comment here. Life is about balance and serenity. Veracity, the truth is in grounding and compassion. Is a connection. So we will definitely talk about connection in just a second. So I talked about the first thing, which is how to achieve harmony in work and life, is to accept that there's no such thing as a perfect balance and to look for harmony instead. The second thing I think is to define what's really important in each of these areas. What are the most important things you want to accomplish? What are your goals? What are your objectives at work? And what are your goals and objectives at home? And really stick to them. Because unless you know what you're trying to achieve, it's hard to understand what are you willing to do to achieve them? What are you willing to make sacrifices for, to make trade-offs for on either side of these? It's not to say that it's a zero-sum game, because I do believe there are synergies between the two. But at some point, you may have to make trade-offs. So what are you willing to trade off on? What are you not willing to compromise on? I knew that it was really important for me to do meaningful work. It was not important to me to achieve certain levels of status and management. I remember when I was working in a company, my goal wasn't to be the top rated person. And it was to be just doing great work, making my clients happy, produce great research. But did I aim to have the perfect scorecard? I'm like, I got better things to do. Was it to get the biggest bonus? I'm like, I'm making enough money to be happy. I don't need any more. So just being a happy, if you were having a grades of A, B, and C, I was a happy B. Just really happy, just being a B, not overachieving, not underachieving, but I knew what my goals were at work. And I also knew at home that I wasn't going to be the turbo parent, constantly helping at school. But I made a commitment to walk my kids to school, into the classroom, to be there with them as they started their morning days, especially elementary school. And that was really important to me, that on days when I was home, that I'd be able to walk them into school, see them with their friends, see the teachers, and wish them a good day. So there are certain goals that you can set for yourself and say, these are really important. They bring meaning to what I'm doing. I'll quickly go through the other two things and then come back. I see a lot of comments here. The third area is to practice the power of no. The power that you achieve from knowing what you want to achieve, knowing what trade-offs you're willing to make, and then having those boundaries set to say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I will not take on this extra assignment. No, I'm not going to make cupcakes for school. I'm going to buy them. So for birthday parties and other things. And so knowing what that limit is and feeling really comfortable saying no, because you're so grounded in your goals and objectives and what you are willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So setting those boundaries, being able to say no is a really important part. It gives you the power back where you may not feel that you have power and control. And the last area is what I would call self-care. There's a lot of stuff, lots of great advice about, get out there and exercise, eat well, meditate. I just put this all under the umbrella of self-care. And to Jay's point, a really important one is connection. I woke up one day and realized that I was working all the time and taking care of my kids and my family, and that there was no time for me. I realized that I woke up one day and realized I had let all my friendships lapse, that my friends were no longer a key part of my life. And I went into a bit of a state of grieving to say, what did I do to get myself into this place? I had worked so much in a harmony of making work, making my family work, that I had not taken the time to fill my cup, to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And so I really set about to really solidify that aspect of my life, to set aside time to do double duty, like go on power walks with my friends, to combine business trips with seeing friends in far-flung places, to set up times for phone calls while I was commuting. So it was a constant juggling and balance of this. But by setting a goal of the self-care and feeding to understand what was it that I needed to be sustained was a really important part of this. Okay, so just to see what other comments here. Love this comment. I'm sorry. Here we go with Cynthia. I just love what you just said about how you're a mom you are right now due to your professional choices and commitment. And so thank you, Cynthia, for saying that that resonated with you. Being clear about how you want to be a mom right now, here in this particular moment, is such a very important thing to be thinking about. Marissa has this comment. This is really poignant. I compartmentalize a lot, she says, breaking things down in small, manageable chunks so it's possible to focus on the immediate need and slowly work through the to-do list so the overall project is done before we realize it. And if it's not done, will it matter in 5 years? If not, then don't linger on it. I love this last piece, Marissa, is, does it matter that I didn't get to my to-do list, that this project isn't done? Is it really going to matter when something else is calling your attention? And I think that perspective and compartmentalizing is super helpful. And I think, again, Melissa also just has a point here about isn't work balance a matter of compartmentalizing? And I do want to address this a little bit because to some degree it is, but I think we also, what we saw with COVID is that if we compartmentalize to the point where we're not bringing into work the realities of what's happening in life, if we don't share that, if we're not aware of what's going on in our employees' lives, and asking them to compartmentalize, that may not always be a healthy thing. Because if the reality is, if there's some breakthrough, if there's something that's impacting your ability to focus on work, or that's um, impacting your ability to focus on your life, on your family, your personal life, then you should be aware of that, especially as employers and as leaders, and not to expect that we have this complete compartmentalization, but to understand that, yeah, there's leakage back and forth as we saw. And I think one of the most beautiful things that happened with COVID is that we were given permission to talk about what was really going on in our lives and to be able to share. It's really hard right now. I have these things. And one of the things I do as a leader is I check in with people, and when we have team meetings and we're going to be working intensely, I ask people, are we all going to be present? Is there anything distracting you? So we're aware of that. And people will sometimes share, I've got this thing in the back of my mind. I just want to share that with you. And sharing with you, I can kind of release it, but also just be aware of that. So I think it's helpful for us to be able to be very honest about this and transparent about it, but at the same time, know that the expectation is that there will be some grace, there will be some understanding about when these moments happen. And I may not be able to focus on work, or I may have to not focus on my life, and to have that understanding and to have that flexibility. A couple other comments. This is again from someone about how they maintain this. Invite or involve your family and children, especially the youngest, in your work journey. Bring them to your office so they can participate in activities. Knowing how your journey looks like creates empathy and reinforces the communication and more harmony. I so love this because I think it's so funny when my children try to describe what I do for work and they kind of like stumble around. I'm like, yeah, you got it pretty right. And from an early age, I would pull them out of school and take them with me on my business trips, especially when they were a little bit older and I was primarily giving speeches or something. They could come along, sit in the audience, and wait for me to give my speech. Sometimes I got them involved with some of the post-speech work, like handing out business cards or helping me sign books. And it was a hoot because they got a kick out of seeing their mom in action, seeing a different side of me. They could see the influence I had, the impact I was having, and it gave them a better appreciation for doing what I do and not being home. It was so hard for me to be away, but there was a better understanding. And so the more we can involve them, the more, again, empathy that they have. Uh, Anthony has this great topic, a great point. Particularly miss the many post-COVID lifestyle resets, embracing purposeful balance. I love this. Purposeful balance has caught my attention in my own lifestyle revision processes. Thank you, Anthony, for sharing that. And I love this idea of purposeful balance because it's grounded in our purpose, our goals, and our objectives. Lynn has this great point. Balance is not easier by having your own business instead of being in a company. You're right about deciding what makes you happy, setting boundaries, and ensuring your own self-care are the ways to find joy at work and at home. I can attest, Lynn, to some people who say they want to start their own business so they have more control. And I don't know who ever thought that was the case. I found that because I was running a business and I was responsible now for the livelihoods of all these people, I had less control because I wanted to make sure everybody else was thriving. And it's so hard. I work with a lot of other CEOs and through my YPO groups. And one of the biggest challenges we have is being able to find this harmony between work and our families and ourselves and our communities. How do we make sure that all these things are working in harmony with each other? And Jay has another great comment. Understanding and navigating boundaries is key. So I'm going to talk about that next. So because one of the most important things here is how do we set those boundaries for ourselves, but also how do we do this at work? So I wanted to explore just what are some of the things that we can be doing at work. And I just wanted to put up here, there's some great statistics from Workfront about work-life balance. So if you need some numbers to back up some of the points you'd like to make or to reinforce and support the changes you'd like to see in your workplace, here are some great numbers. Just to give you some of the benefits, some of the things we found was that 21% of employees who have good work-life balance actually work harder. In that almost 90%, 89% of HR human resource professionals report a positive link between flexible work and employee retention. And that we can see that healthcare expenditures for low stress workers is about half of those from high stress workers. There are three reasons from the Workfront research that they found about what leads to bad work-life balance at work. The number one thing is that people said, 60% of people said that dealing with work-life imbalance, the main reason is because they had bad or overbearing bosses, just bad bosses. And this, of course, makes so much sense because so much of your happiness and your satisfaction at work is determined by your immediate manager. You're the boss that you report to. And if that boss is not understanding, not empathetic to the situations that you may have between work and life, it's going to be pretty miserable. Another 39% said that working beyond standard hours, either more hours or outside of traditional hours, was a major cause of imbalance and lack of harmony. And then also inflexible work hours or rigid time off scheduling. So you can't take the time off when you need to deal with life, to deal with doctor's appointments, children's, anything, missing birthdays and other really important events. So the things that I wanted to talk about today are just three very simple things. I think it's this whole concept of care. If we can create a culture of care in our organizations, it really addresses this whole bad boss idea and addresses and give us guidance on the whole idea of flexibility. In some other surveys that it was indicated that only 31% of employees said that they strongly agree that their employers care about them as a person. Only less than a third. And it's interesting, that's also very correlated with employee engagement and satisfaction. Only about a third of employees say that they're highly engaged at work. And so it makes a lot of sense, right? Because if we don't feel like you care about me, then I'm not going to have the confidence that you are going to help me maintain this harmony between work and life. So there is a psychological contract between an employer and the leaders and the managers in that organization and the employees that can lead to psychological safety and empathy and trust, respect, fairness, compassion, even objectivity and fairness. These are all things that people really want. The number one and two things that people expect of their leaders is that they're honest and that they're fair. And that there's just a sense of caring in that you will give me that honesty and the fairness. And also that you have enough respect for me as a person to be able to do this. So I think the number one thing is how do we build a culture of care in our organizations? How do we bring back the humanity? And in some ways, this is where I think the compartmentalizing is very helpful, but also can be a crutch because it's an excuse for some leaders to say, well, I'm just going to compartmentalize it. I don't want you to bring this to work. I don't want to hear about it. I don't care about it. Versus us showing, I care about all aspects. I care about the whole person that you come in with. And that's understanding how all of it's impacting work because it does flow over. How we feel at home impacts how we feel at work. How we feel at work impacts how we feel at home. And to have harmony in both of those is a really important thing to understand as a leader. So again, and Todd Wyman just points out, yes, absolutely, this leads to psychological safety. And especially because we are disruptive leaders, we are trying to create a huge amount of change. Psychological safety is extremely important because how do we ask people to extend themselves, to be disruptive, to take on change, to take on potentially huge, audacious things and potentially fail without psychological safety. And in the most basic level, if I don't feel safe talking about work and life and how I'm trying to have harmony between them, I'm not going to have that psychological safety then to extend myself in areas of work too. The second thing, okay, so I talked about building a culture of care. The second thing, this is a no-brainer, but have flexible work schedules and set the boundaries of what you expect people to do. 60% of people want more control about when and where they work. And this has changed so much, especially since COVID with remote working. But I think it's especially important for us to set and model how what these boundaries look like. And so one of the things that we do in my company is we actually put into the email footers a notice that says, and I'll tell you what's in mine. It says, my working hours may not be the same as your working hours. Please don't feel obligated to reply outside of your normal work schedule. And I live in San Francisco, and most of my team is in London, 8 hours difference. And so if we were to coordinate our work schedules, there's actually about 2 hours a day that we actually overlap in our normal work schedule. So we have to be really coordinated. And the expectation, again, that I may be working into your evening, but I don't expect you to work in those evenings. If you do and choose to, that's great. But that's not the expectation. The other part of this is to set, when will we work together? What will be our meeting days and times? And this is one thing that I did at Altimeter and was absolutely brilliant. We actually set aside times for meetings, and they were on certain days, and they were usually in the early afternoon, West Coast time, so we could still get people on the East Coast. And these were the only times you would schedule internal meetings. And we also set the same expectations with our clients, that these were the times when we were going to meet, because the rest of the time was when we did our work. We could do other things and we could work on flexible schedules, but these times were the only times available for meetings. And so by doing the opposite of carving out time to do work or to set aside time for your family and your personal life, we just did the opposite. We said, these are the times, these are the only times that meetings were allowed. And that gave us a fully flexible schedule for the rest of the day. So that's just one way to do that, especially if you can schedule onto your calendars yourself to mark out these are the meeting times. And that is extremely helpful, again, to create that flexibility. And the last point that just one little trick, especially when setting expectations with customers and especially in clients, to make deliverables happen on Fridays and not Mondays. Because whenever you have a deliverable on a Monday, guess what you do? You work through the weekend. Versus the last deliverable is mid-afternoon on a Friday. So it can close out your work, have still some time to clean up, plan for the next week, whatever it is. But by setting deadlines in a thoughtful, purposeful way of when and how we're going to do our work can really make a difference. All right, I see a lot of comments here. Let's see, we have Sanjay saying, this is an interesting subject. Work-life balance is not a science, rather it's an art to live a better and more meaningful life. So thank you so much for that. It's a really great comment again, Sanjay, to talk about this is not a science. There's no checklist or formula to be able to make this work. It really is an art, and art needs to be practiced. And the other thing, you can never perfect art. But each piece of art is perfect in its own way that is being expressed and done. So I think that's a great way to be thinking about that. All right, the last point I want to make, and then we'll close out, is to lead by example. As a leader, how are you modeling the ability to have harmony? Do you talk about it? Do you make it a priority in your conversations? Do you communicate what the expectations are? Do you take vacations? And especially, I think, not glorifying overworking. I had once a leader in an organization who sent out an email about work-life balance late on a Saturday night. And the irony of that was just incredible, that this person was writing the email about work-life balance like at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. And so being really careful about doing what you say versus just only talking about it. So do what you say we're going to do and really model and set that as an example. And I'll do all sorts of things. Like I'll write emails over the weekend, but reserve sending them until I know when the person's going to be back in the office on Monday. Or even if I know that they're not going to be on vacation, I have it set up for the day after they come back from vacation. So just taking into account the fact that I don't want all of this stuff to be piling up for people, stressing them out when they come back into the office, just when they come back from vacation or from a weekend, and just being really thoughtful about um, the impact that I have, the empathy I have about how I will be making them feel about things. So that's what I have for today. I'm just looking at the last couple of comments here. I think that's all we have for now. I encourage you again to think about this whole idea of how do you actually think about having greater harmony for yourself, but also for your team. And oftentimes we forget about the ability to bring life into work and to set expectations about when is that allowed? When can we actually bring that up? Because the more people can feel like there is harmony, I can express all of these things in the same place. I can have transparency. There's a level of trust about me being able to talk about these things. The better off we're going to be, the more harmony people are going to be able to feel. So next week, I'm going to be talking about a really fun topic, which is rethinking the employee relationship. I have a very specific idea and way, and I sort of talked about it today about this culture of care. How do we communicate this idea that we truly do care about our employees? And I think this one shift that I'll talk about next week is a really important one about how we can rethink these employee relationships. And instead of just satisfaction or engagement, employee relationships and how to make them better. So I wish you all the best over the coming week, and I will talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.